Good Lasca Hirlock. Taoiseach, for the last few months, the vast majority of children at primary and post-primary level in this state have had to endure the sheer misery of being taught in classrooms and school buildings that are absolutely freezing cold. Indeed, it is not an exaggeration to say that thousands of very young children, especially those being taught in prefabs, which were never warm to start with, are literally numb with the cold during the school day. I've had parents tell me that their children are returning home from school with headaches or muscle pain from the constant clenching of their teeth and from the shivering. This is a totally ludicrous, absurd and unacceptable situation. How on earth can we expect children to learn in an environment where they are distracted by the cold, unable to concentrate, or the constant rush of freezing air from the wide open windows, particularly in the last week? How can we expect our teachers to work in those conditions? We here today, as TDs, are not working in those conditions, so why do we expect others to work in those unbearable conditions? The Department's guidance, issued last May, is that the overarching approach for schools should be to have windows open as fully as possible when the classrooms are not in use, such as during break times or lunch times, and also at the end of the school day, and only partially open when the classrooms are in use. That's all very well in the warmer months, but at this time of year, it borders on negligence to expect pupils as young as 5 years of age to begin their formative years of education in conditions more suited to a penguin than a child. There are also the added complications that come with having windows constantly open for children who are hard of hearing or deaf. The level of background noise in a classroom is increased significantly and only adds to the challenges that they face from having visual access to faces and lips obscured by the use of masks. Many schools are not fortunate enough to have indoor PE facilities, and this means that children are being taken from freezing cold classrooms to the cold outdoors to warm up, and then being brought back again to a freezing classroom. We know that some schools are actively sending children home because of the inability to maintain the appropriate balance between ventilation and heating. The teaching union's advice is that members are instructed not to work in rooms where the minimum temperature level of 17.2 degrees is not achieved. But here again, many teachers are deeply conflicted and are simply trying to manage a difficult situation as effectively as they can without closing the classroom or indeed the school. And I commend them for all of their efforts, that they have kept the schools going. But Taoiseach, this situation can't go on. It's intolerable, it's inappropriate, and we need cop-on and common sense.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy, and thanks for raising this, this important issue. It's been mentioned to me on a number of occasions. You know, it is a case of getting the balance right between ventilation and temperature control rather. And you know, no child should be in a classroom wearing an anorak, having to wear gloves because it's so cold. And I know some children do have to experience that, often because of prefabs and inadequate buildings, even though we've replaced so many prefabs in recent years. You know, you can take things to an extreme, and if a classroom is so cold because all the windows are open that a child has to wear gloves and has to wear a coat, well, that is probably passing the point of reasonable balance. And I know it's difficult for teachers and school managers to make that judgment, but we are asking them to make that judgment and to be sensible in getting that balance right. Clean air is really important. I think as we live with COVID, as we prepare for the possibility of future pandemics, as we do more to keep viruses under control, it's going to become more important in terms of what we do with our buildings and our public buildings in particular. That does involve ventilation. It also involves air filtration, and that's why grants are provided to schools if they choose to use towards the purchase of air filters. And I think increasingly when it comes to new buildings, it's going to be UV light, using UV light in ventilation systems to kill all viruses, not just the COVID virus. And it's something we're going to talk a lot more about and hear more about, I think, in the years to come. So there are grants available to schools to help with this. I appreciate that it can only go so far and that work can only be done so quickly. And there is a sensible balance, I think, between air filtration and clean air and comfortable, tolerable temperatures in any classroom or any workplace. And it's important that we get that right. One thing that can be done, for example, is to air a room. And you'll often, I know from my granny saying to me how important it was to air a room, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to leave the windows open for 8 hours. So it's important to try and get that balance right.
I think the real problem lies with the department guidelines. I mean, the guidelines do state that the windows have to be partially open during the class time. Now, many of our school buildings, unfortunately, are very old buildings and indeed prefabs, and that's where the problem lies, that even when the principals and the teachers, the majority of whom are adhering to exactly what they're being told by the department, when they're adhering by those exact guidelines, there's still an issue. So would you accept that the department's guidelines now need to be urgently updated, given that we're expecting to return to a greater degree of normality, which is very, very welcome? And I do appreciate the efforts of the Minister for Education and indeed of government in trying to get the balance right. But I genuinely feel that there is a problem here, and it lies within the department guidelines. We need to ensure that there is common sense and cop on, and that indeed there is safety. And I think schools have done a fantastic job in keeping the schools running up to this point. But I do also want to state to you that because of the issues in terms of the cold and children not being able to concentrate, we have, and it has been raised with me directly by Leaving Cert students, that they're looking for the hybrid model. They feel that they have been disrupted, they can't concentrate in class, and I'm also calling for that issue to be addressed and for clarity to be given to Leaving Cert students as well.
Thanks, Deputy. There's a group meeting today on that, and I agree with you that it is important that Leaving Cert students have clarity about this, because they need to know the rules of the game. They need to know exactly what exam they're preparing for and what the format and context of that will be, and we'll provide them with that clarity in the very near future. When it comes to the pandemic, we are now moving into a different phase, into a different chapter of managing this pandemic. And certainly the risk in schools is lower than it was a few months ago, in part because the Omicron variant is much milder, or I should say less severe rather than much milder, in part because we are now able to vaccinate primary school children, and also because of the level of immunity that's built up in our society. And that does lead to the view, and it's a reasonable view, that we will have to look at all our guidelines again. So there will be an EFA meeting today. There'll be a cabinet meeting on Friday. On foot of that, we expect to be able to ease restrictions. And of course, on foot of that, because of the change in the balance of risk, that then allows us to update our guidelines, not just in relation to schools, but also in relation to workplaces, and we would intend to do that.